Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
Sir. Yes, sir. And make sure you chat. Thank you, sir.
Could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
John D-Bar. D-E, B as boy, A-R-R.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Barr, how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Frenchtown Fire Department as a captain and a paramedic.
How long have you been with the Frenchtown Fire Department?
Just over 20 years.
Any other experience as a first responder?
I started my career in Bedford Township, 1998 till 2004.
So, all told, how long have you been a first responder?
Approximately 26 years.
You indicated that you are a paramedic?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been a paramedic?
Approximately 23 years.
And were you employed as a firefighter and a paramedic on April 20th of 2024?
Yes, sir.
How were you assigned on that day?
I was the shift commander in charge of the day's operations.
What, I guess for those of us that aren't in the industry, what does shift commander for day's operation actually mean?
Excuse me, I'm responsible for the emergent and non-emergent response to all calls for service within the township, outside of the township, as well as general supervision associated with the personnel that are assigned to that platoon.
As a supervisor, do you respond to all the calls, or is it sort of depend on the nature of the call?
Yes, sir. It depends on the nature of the call. The higher priority calls are typically the incidents that I would respond to.
And when you say higher priority, does that mean more serious?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Serious in nature.
And were you dispatched to the Swan Boat Club on April 20th of 2024?
I was.
And do you recall what that dispatch was?
Yes, sir. Berlin Township Fire Department was dispatched to the Swan Boat Club on the report of a vehicle through the building with multiple persons injured on the ground, as well as a possible child entrapment.
Is Swan Boat Club in your jurisdiction?
No, sir, it is not.
You were brought in as extra help?
Yes, sir, we were.
And when you received that dispatch, do you recall where you were?
Yes, sir. I was at Station 1, getting ready to pull out of the parking lot, perform some general errands for the day.
And how did you respond to that dispatch?
I responded to my department-issued vehicle with my emergency lights and siren activated to the scene, approximately 9 minutes.
Do you know about what time you arrived on scene?
I believe it would have been about 3:15.
Were there other first responders or law enforcement already there?
Yes, sir. I pulled in with Berlin Fire Department's first arriving unit, as well as the sergeant from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
So you were very early to the scene?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you please describe what you observed when you arrived at Swan Boat Club?
Once I parked my vehicle, I noticed the large hole in the side of the building. Numerous people on the exterior of the building looking for help, asking for help, as well as an individual being attended to on the right side of the building, or right side of the opening.
Do you know who that would be?
That would have been Zayn Phillips.
Okay. And did you enter the boat club?
I did, sir.
How did you enter the boat club?
Through the opening that was created by the vehicle.
What did you see when you entered?
Equal amount of chaos on the inside. To my right were 3 individuals, 2 of them, 2 females sitting in a chair and 1 female lying on the floor.
Did you interact yourself with any of the injured victims?
No, sir. I was able to ascertain that they were conscious, alert, breathing, and not in need of immediate medical attention.
Is that because of your role as a supervisor?
Yes, sir. As a senior paramedic on scene and first arriving, my responsibilities typically would be to triage or categorize the nature of injuries associated with each victim and arrange for the transport of those victims as appropriate.
And so you were ultimately involved in determining who went by ambulance or life flight if necessary?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you recall if anybody was life flighted that day?
Yes, sir. I believe that would have been Jaden Phillips.
That is the son that survived. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And nobody else was transported via life flight?
No, sir.
Is that because it was determined their injuries were not so severe that they needed that?
For the totality of the injuries, I believe we transported 7 total patients. 1 went by air ambulance. 2 air ambulances were requested at the scene. The crew of the initial aircraft assisted in advanced life support procedures with Zayn in the back of a Frenchtown ambulance.
So you requested a second as you call it air ambulance, I call it life flight, I'll call it air ambulance, sorry. You requested a second, but that was ultimately not used?
Correct. The crew was utilized, but the aircraft was not.
Why was that not used?
Those individuals from that aircraft were tasked with assisting in the resuscitation efforts with Zayn.
But he did not survive.
No, sir.
So he had deceased on the scene.
Yes, sir.
Do you know how many victims were transported by ambulance?
6 total by ground, 1 by air ambulance.
And do you know where those victims were sent, the ones that went? Do you know where the victim that was life-flighted went, where Jaden went?
Jaden was transported by aircraft to University of Michigan Mott's Children's Hospital.
Okay. And out of the road ambulances, where were those victims transported to?
Miss Dodds was transported by a Frenchtown ambulance to Corwell Trenton. I believe it was Miss Stith was transported by a Huron Valley ambulance crew to Corwell Trenton. And then I believe we had 2 additional patients, Miss Rath and Richards, were transported by a Rockwood ambulance to Wyandotte Hospital. And then Mr. Smothers was transported by a Monroe Community ambulance to Detroit Children's Hospital.
Were some victims able to transport themselves?
That is my understanding.
So you wouldn't have been involved in that? They would have gotten a ride or driven themselves?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So you referenced where you saw people injured in there. Do you know specifically where Miss Leah Stith was located initially?
I believe Miss Stith was at the base of the bar, almost to the end on the right side if you were facing the bar from the hole that had been created in the side of the building, laying on her back, being attended to by a male individual.
And what about Mr. Edward Smothers? Do you know where he was initially located?
I believe Mr. Smothers was in the breezeway, more or less in the center of the breezeway, sitting in an upright position. He had an obvious deformity to his right leg. He had some injuries to his face that were bleeding.
When you say obvious deformity, are you indicating what appears to be a broken?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Diane Medina, do you know where Miss Medina was found?
I believe Miss Medina was just to the left of Miss Stith, just to the rear of the vehicle.
So that would also be along the bar?
Yes, sir, at the base of the bar.
And lastly, do you know where Jaden Phillips was located?
Jaden, it is my understanding that he was thrown over the top of the bar and was located to the left, down below some of the debris.
Are you saying that Jaden was hit by the car and thrown actually over the bar, but was found underneath it or behind it?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Were you involved in providing any aid to Zayn Phillips?
No, sir. The only interaction I had with him was my initial assessment of him as I was entering the building, and then when I exited the building, I did stop and check for a pulse on Zayn.
And at that point, did he still have a pulse?
He did, however, it was weak and threatening.
Do you know where Zayn was originally located?
I am not aware of where Zayn originally was located.
Because he had already been extricated by
Yes,
that
sir.
time? Okay. And what about Alanah Phillips? Do you know where she was located?
Miss Phillips, when I was triaging Mr. Smothers and Miss Dodds, it was made aware to me that Alanah was somewhere in the vicinity of the vehicle. When I moved some of the debris, I was able to locate her at the corner of the door, just in front of the vehicle.
Were you able to remove her?
I was not.
Why is that?
Based on my training, education, and experience, I was able to determine that the injuries she had sustained were not compatible with life.
It was fatal.
Yes, sir.
Are you issued a camera that you wear daily?
No, sir.
All right. No further questions, Judge.
Cross. All right, this witness be excused.
Yes, Judge.
Thank you. Next witness, Judge People call Deputy Stephen Schmidt.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Sir.
Okay, thank you. Morning. Deputy, would you state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Deputy Stephen Schmidt, Steven Schmidt.
Thank you. Please hold. Thank you, Judge. Deputy, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you worked for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 5 years.
Okay. Did you have any law enforcement jobs before that?
I did.
And what was that?
I worked for the Dundee Police Department for approximately 2.5 years.
Did you have any law enforcement jobs before that?
I did.
What was that?
I worked for the Riverview Police Department for just a short amount of time, approximately 9 months.
Okay, so you've been a law enforcement officer just over 8 years?
Around there.
Okay. And were you working for the Sheriff's Department on April 20th?
That was.
And what was your assignment back then?
I was assigned to road patrol.
Okay. Okay. Since then, you've been promoted to a specialized division within the sheriff's office?
Yes.
So you're no longer a road patrol deputy?
No, I'm assigned to the Detective Bureau.
And currently, you have all the training, certification, and educations necessary to be a certified police officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
And all those are up to date as of now?
Yes.
And they were up to date on April 20th?
Yes, sir.
And what was your assignment on April 20th?
I was assigned to Road Patrol, District 1, which would be North County.
Okay. And in road patrol, you respond to calls for service?
Yes. If somebody calls, we go.
Did you receive a call for service that brought you here to testify today?
I did.
And what was the nature of that call?
It was for a vehicular crash at the Swan Boat Club.
And did you respond?
I did.
What did you see when you arrived?
Upon arrival, it was pure chaos when I got there. There were people running around, injured people, people lying on the ground. One of my first observations was a large hole in the side of the boat club where a vehicle had driven through it. Upon walking up, I saw a small child who he didn't appear to be breathing.
Where was he located?
In the grass just outside of the hole in the wall in the side of the boat club.
So as you're assessing the scene, what do you do to orient yourself?
Well, the first thing I tried to do was just kind of find a place wherever I could help. That being with first aid as best as I could.
And where did you wind up within the overall scene?
So, Conservation Officer Ingersoll, he was in the breezeway area between the bar and almost like the foyer type area. He was asking for help. He was with a small child who had a significant leg injury.
Okay. Was there anybody else in the breezeway area when you went in?
There was a middle-aged female. She was sitting up against the wall.
And what was her state?
She was in and out of consciousness from what I remember.
And so at least initially when you arrived on scene, you just tried to assist with first aid of the victims as you could see needed?
Yes.
Eventually, did you make contact with Sergeant Bomia?
I did.
And what was his position on the scene in regards to the sheriff's office?
So he was the shift supervisor at the time.
So at the time, was he the commanding officer on scene, for lack of a better term?
Yes, he was the officer in charge.
Did he give you any direction?
He did. He advised me that he had the driver of the vehicle seated in the rear of his patrol vehicle. And at that time, he asked me if I would start an investigation for the crash with the driver.
Okay. Did he give you any direction in what kind of investigation to perform?
Yes, there were some cues for a possible intoxicated driver, so that was the investigation that I conducted.
Okay. So at this point, you've been a law enforcement officer for 8 years.
Correct.
All of them road patrol.
Correct.
Had you conducted an OWI investigation prior to that day?
I have.
About how many?
Personally, somewhere in the range of about 50 myself, plus I've also trained other new deputies and new officers and been part of their OWI operating while intoxicating investigations, as well as assisting other officers at the sheriff's office.
So do you receive specialized training specifically to OWI investigations at the police academy?
We do.
And as part of being a police officer, do you take updates to that training throughout the course of your employment?
Yes, we do.
And you did as being a police officer for those 8 years?
Yes, sir.
Did you receive any specialized training beyond the academy and those subsequent educations in OWI investigation?
Yes, so I attended ARIDE training, or Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving training, in approximately August of 2022.
Okay, and if you could just explain to the jury briefly what that is outside of its name.
So it's just a more specialized training. They teach you some different techniques for sobrieties, besides the main three that are recognized by National Highway Traffic Safety Administration as being like the three primary SFSTs or sobriety tests.
Okay, so I know the term sobriety is SFST, sobriety test. Explain to the jury just a little bit what a sobriety test is, what its purpose is.
So a sobriety test is essentially a divided attention test. Somebody that's under the influence of alcohol or narcotics, they might not be able to focus on instructions, plus then at the same time being able to actually conduct the test.
So you use the term SFST, or standardized field sobriety test.
Correct.
What are those in the state of Michigan?
So in the state of Michigan, there are three. The first being the horizontal gaze nystagmus, or what's an eye test. The second being it's called one leg stand. Essentially, you stand on either foot of choosing, you lift the other leg slightly off the ground with your hands at your sides, and you're asked to count numbers. The third being walk and turn. Walk and turn, essentially you walk a certain steps down, you take a small series of steps to turn yourself around, and then you walk back to the starting point.
And those are the standardized field sobriety tests in Michigan
Correct.
that all officers are trained on.
Correct.
Specifically as to the eye test, the horizontal gaze nystagmus, what are you taught to look for on that test?
So you're taught to look for what's called nystagmus, or an involuntary jerk of your pupils. Somebody who is under the influence, they will tend to, when your eyes will, somebody that's sober, your eyes will roll smoothly across your head. Somebody who's under the influence, when they're focusing on the cue, which a pen or the tip of your finger, you'll actually see that their pupils actually jerk from side to side, which shows an impairment.
When conducting these tests, you're not just looking at the results of the test, are you?
No.
What else are you looking at?
You're looking for other cues for intoxication, whether it's bloodshot, watery eyes, whether their inability to stand on their own or keep balance, if they're slurring their speech, their inability to follow simple directions, etc.
So with this training, you approach Sergeant Bomia's vehicle, is that right?
Correct.
What do you find when you get there?
Well, the defendant was seated in the rear of Sergeant Bomia's vehicle. So that's where I located her. I was in the rear of his patrol vehicle.
What did you do once you located her?
Once I located her, I began to talk to her, ask what her name is, ask if she's injured, just basic questions.
What are the things you're looking for just in asking the basic questions?
Well, immediately you're looking for signs of intoxication, whether they have, like I said, bloodshot, watery eyes. Do they smell like alcohol or intoxicants? Are their clothes disheveled? Have they vomited or urinated on themselves? Just basic signs like that.
So these visual basic signs that you look for in an OWI investigation, did you observe any of them in the defendant that day?
Yes.
Which ones?
So at that time, I could smell the odor of intoxicants coming from her, bloodshot, watery eyes, and then later on, inability to keep balance.
Okay. So you had a brief conversation with her as she's seated in the back of the patrol vehicle.
Correct.
And then at some point you make a determination you're going to attempt standardized field sobriety testing.
I do. I asked her if she'd be willing to consent to take some sobriety tests, and she agreed to do so.
Okay. And what did you do with the defendant then?
I had her exit the patrol vehicle. Upon exiting the patrol vehicle, she was having problems with balance. So she used my arm to kind of hold herself up while I walked her to the rear of the patrol vehicle. Before that, during our medical questionnaire, I was informed that she does have neuropathy in her hands and feet.
And what's your understanding of the result of that?
The understanding of neuropathy?
Yes.
He's not a medical professional with a foundation that he knows what neuropathy is.
That's why I asked him what his understanding of it is. I'm not asking for an expert opinion. I'm asking with what his understanding of it is, how did that affect how he treated the defendant?
I think that makes sense. He's not giving an expert opinion. The objection is overruled.
And as far as in my experience of somebody with neuropathy, it's something that's neurological, numbing in their hands or feet or legs.
How does that impact the way you conduct your OWI investigation as it pertains to sobriety tests?
So I think immediately at that time that took the one leg stand and the walk and turn kind of off the table for me. I didn't feel like she'd be in any condition to try to perform those tests at that time.
And that's because she had self-reported neuropathy and you had witnessed her exhibiting a lack of ability to balance.
Correct.
Even if someone hadn't reported a medical condition, with that lack of balance, how would you approach the standardized field sobriety tests?
In her condition that she was that day?
Yes, or just in general.
So always whenever I have conducted a OWI investigation, I think one of the most important things is to see if they're able to conduct any of the physical tests. If they're able to, no prior injuries or anything that would prohibit them from doing so, then I think that would be sufficient to complete those tests.
So if someone's experiencing a lack of balance, would you ask them to do the one leg stand?
Most likely not.
Why not?
Their safety is paramount for me. I don't want them falling over or tripping on themselves or injuring themselves any further.
And what about the walk and turn?
The walk and turn is the same way. If somebody's having a hard time walking, I don't want to make them walk 8 steps down, take a turn, and then walk 8 steps back towards me. The last thing I want is for somebody to fall into traffic and injure themselves.
But that's not the case with the HGN, right? With the horizontal gaze nystagmus?
Correct.
Did you attempt to conduct that on the defendant?
I did.
And how did that work out?
I tried a few different times. The defendant was not able to focus on the stimulus, which was my finger, so I wasn't able to actually complete that test.
What do you mean she wasn't able to focus?
So when I held my finger up in front of her face, I was moving it back and forth, and she was failing to follow my finger. She was just staring directly at me.
So she wasn't. What do you tell someone with the stimulus when you're conducting an HGN?
I tell them to follow it with their eyes, and their eyes only don't move their head.
Okay. And was she able to follow it with her eyes?
No.
Did she turn her head one way or the other to try to follow it?
At some point, she was trying to use her head to follow it, but ultimately, she was unable to complete the test.
Okay. You talk about things you look for in conducting sobriety tests. Her behavior in that test, is that any way significant to you with your experience and training?
It could be, yes.
And how?
In prior experiences, I've had people that were impaired. They were unable to follow the stimulus while conducting that test. Just because you can't follow the stimulus or complete the test doesn't mean that that's not a sign of intoxication or impairment.
And that's part of following instructions too, is that correct?
Yes.
So you were only able to attempt one standardized field sobriety test. Are there any other sobriety tests you give in the event that somebody's unable to conduct the physical portions?
Yes. Typically, if somebody's unable to complete the physical portions, I'll go with a mental one, it's a test that they're able to do without doing anything physically.
Did you do so in this case?
I did.
And what test did you administer?
So I had the defendant recite the alphabet A to Z without singing.
Was she able to do that?
She was able to complete that test.
Okay. And did you do any other cognitive tests?
I did.
And what was that?
I did a number counting test. I gave her instructions. I asked her to start from 100 and count backwards to 88.
Was she able to effectuate that test?
She was not.
What were the results of that test?
Would I be able to refresh myself with those results? Okay. So as far as the results of that test, she was able to count backwards from 100 back to 91, and then back up to 100, and then from there she skipped over 88, and then was counting in the 70s and began descending in the 70s from 78 to 72.
Okay. And the initial instruction was to count backwards from 100 to 88?
Correct.
At that point, did you do anything else in regards to a roadside OWI investigation?
No, that concluded the investigation.
What was, in your training and experience, what did you believe existed at that time?
Well, I believe that there was probable cause for impairment to make an arrest for operating while intoxicated at that time.
And what did you do with the defendant once you made that determination?
So I placed her in handcuffs, advised her she was under arrest, did handcuff her in front, because earlier she advised that she had a wrist injury from the crash, and I didn't really want to handcuff her behind her back and strain herself or hurt herself any further, so I handcuffed her in front, and then she was placed in the rear of my patrol vehicle.
Okay. And that concluded your role in the OWI investigation at the scene?
At the scene, correct.
Did you remain on scene after that?
I did.
And what did you do?
At that time, I was just trying to do whatever I could to try to alleviate some of the duties from anybody that was there. Like I said before, it was a very chaotic situation. There were medical personnel running around everywhere, and I just wanted to make sure that, if anything was needed at that time, that I could be there and assist.
Okay. At some point, did you interact with Deputy Karina of the Sheriff's Department?
I did.
And what was the nature of that interaction?
So Deputy Karina wanted to do some further investigation of the whole incident with the defendant.
Deputy Karina wanted to continue the OWI investigation?
Correct.
And he did so?
Correct.
And you stood by while that happened?
I did.
Okay. And also during that time, you dealt with other folks at the scene,
I did.
witnesses, is that correct?
Yes.
And other police officers.
Yes.
At some point, were you told to leave the scene?
I was.
And who directed you to do that?
That would have been Sergeant Beaumont.
And what instruction did he give you?
He asked me to take the defendant to the hospital so we can do the blood draw for the OWI investigation.
So just explain to the jury roughly, what does that mean?
So after somebody's placed under arrest for operating while intoxicated, there's a form that we have to read them. It's their chemical test. There's a DI 177, which is the state form, that's what it's named, and then DI 93. So the 177 is consent. So they give consent for chemical tests. The DI 93 would be they don't give consent. On the back of the paperwork, there's instructions. I read her the instructions, asked her if she'd be willing to take a chemical test, which at that time would be a blood draw, and then she would be transported to the hospital to get that blood draw conducted.
Okay. And did you in fact transport her to the hospital?
I did.
At this time, were you aware that this crash had fatalities?
I was semi-aware, but not to the full extent.
Okay. By the time you got to the hospital, were you aware?
Yes.
Okay. Does the sheriff's office have a policy on chemical testing when there's a fatal crash?
Yes. It's in best judgment to make sure that instead of doing a breath test, a blood draw is done.
And what about as it pertains to a consent blood draw?
I believe with the consent blood draw at that time, it would have been best practice to complete a search warrant for her blood regardless.
All right. And did you do so?
I did.
And what's involved, Deputy, in completing a search warrant for a blood draw at the hospital?
So we have a online form that we essentially fill out. That's our...
Your Honor, I'll check in this area. Those are all questions of law that the court is actually regarding the search warrant.
I'm not proffering it for its legality. I'm proffering it to explain the time frame between the crash and the blood draw.
I think the objection is overruled. I think what he's telling us is just the basic procedure, and I think that is appropriate.
Your Honor, the procedure I totally respect. It's just any comments or anything. Thank you.
We won't get into it. So you have an online form.
Correct. We have an online form that's on our laptops. We fill all the form out. It's essentially everything I kind of just went over: what happened, the day, time, results of sobrieties, what sobrieties were conducted, and then after that, I have to contact whoever's the on-call prosecutor. They have to agree that there's enough probable cause there for the search warrant to be signed, and then I have to contact the on-call magistrate and have the actual search warrant signed and then sent back to me.
And April 20th, 2024 is a Saturday, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're dealing with all folks who are not at work.
Correct.
That's why you're using the term on-call, right?
Yes, sir. Everybody is not working during that time, so.
At least everybody who you would need for a search warrant.
Correct.
So any idea how long all that took, Deputy?
From the time of the crash to the time of the blood draw?
Well, just the time to prepare the search warrant and get it signed.
I don't know specifically, but it kind of is a time-consuming process.
Okay. And where do you typically in these types of situations do all that?
It's all done in the vehicle. I don't have access on any of the computers at the hospital to do anything like that, so it has to be done outside of the emergency room at the hospital.
Okay. Is it only upon your completion of those documents that you then enter the hospital?
Yes.
And is that what happened in this case?
Yes.
So you go to the scene, you investigate, you leave with the defendant, drive to the hospital, complete your paperwork. At this point, you finally get into the physical hospital.
Correct.
You take the defendant in with you?
Yes.
And were there any other law enforcement officers there?
Deputy Flint was there with me as well.
Okay. At this point, when you enter the hospital with the defendant, is this the first interaction the hospital has with you and the defendant? Do
Yeah.
they know you're coming?
I don't believe they knew I was coming at that time. I don't recall, though.
So once you enter the hospital, what's the procedure once you arrive in these types of cases?
So the procedure anytime we take somebody in the hospital, they need to be ran through registration to get them registered to the hospital. And then after that, then whoever's working the front desk there and back of the ER, they assign us where to go or assign us a room. In most of these cases, we go to the back. There's a seclusion room back there, which is away from everybody that's in the general area of the emergency room. So that's where I took her that day.
Is that where you were directed to take her?
Yes.
And you say she had to be, the defendant was registered at the hospital. Is that common in a OWI investigation blood draw?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other reason the defendant would have been registered in the hospital that day?
Well, she had some injuries from the crash, specifically her wrist, and I needed to get that attended to before we could ever even think about leaving the hospital.
So you're not just there for a blood draw, but you're there for treatment for the defendant's injury?
Correct.
And you advised the hospital of that?
Yes.
Do you know why Deputy Flint was present also?
I believe Sergeant Bomia wanted another officer there, security reasons, and just to make sure we had 2 sets of eyes on everything, so everything was all secure.
Is that typical in an OWI blood draw?
Sometimes, but not typically.
So in your 50-plus OWI investigations, have you ever been present for a blood draw before?
I have.
About how many times?
Probably the majority of those.
So is there a specialized procedure mandated by the state of Michigan and the Michigan State Police in conducting a blood draw for an OWI?
There is.
And how does that procedure start?
So there is paperwork that the hospital gives to me that needs to be filled out. One of them being the consent to draw form. I believe there's another piece of paper as well that I have to fill out there. And then after I do that, that's when I get a Michigan State Police blood kit.
So the initial paperwork you have to fill out, that has nothing to do with the legality of the draw. That's just for the hospital.
Correct. That's just for their own records and mandating.
And the Michigan State Police blood draw kit, what is that?
So it is it's a cardboard box that has a seal on it, like a sticker seal. And on the inside, there's contents of paperwork. There's the actual blood vial tubes that are contained in the box. And then there's a bag for, at the end, that's where the actual tubes that come in the cardboard, they go into that bag, and then everything gets sealed into the box, and then you get another sticker, security sticker that you put on the outside.
So just by naming it a Michigan State Police blood draw kit, that kind of begs the question. But do you know who provides these kits and what their nature is across the state?
So we, as the sheriff's office, we keep our blood kits at the hospital.
So in other words, so you get them from the hospital?
Correct.
Do you, the sheriff's department, provide them to the hospital?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And who provides them to the sheriff's department?
I would guess somebody from command, but I'm not sure.
So are these standardized across the state, do you know?
They are. Everybody in the state of Michigan uses the same kit.
Okay. So you obtain the kit in this instance from the emergency room, from the hospital?
Correct.
And they store them for the sheriff's office there?
Yes.
And that's what you did in this case? Is that typical?
Yes.
You don't keep the kits in your car?
We do not.
Okay. When you obtained a kit in this case, was the kit sealed?
It was.
Did it appear to be in good order?
It did.
No dents, scratches, holes?
Nothing.
Did it appear typical of the kits you've seen in the past?
Yes.
Once you obtain the kit, well, in fact, this is just a demonstrative exhibit. Show this to you, Deputy. What is that?
This is a Michigan State Police blood kit.
And is that, at least so far, typical of what you would handle in every OWI blood draw investigation?
Yes.
And so once you obtain it from the hospital, what's the first thing you do?
Well, the first step is to open it up. The kits have a integrity seal that's already on it. This is how all kits come. Can I open it?
Sure.
Okay.
As you do that, Deputy, that day, did you break the seal on the kit?
No, Deputy Flint did that day.
Did he do that in your presence?
He did.
Did he open the box or simply cut the seal?
I believe he took the paperwork out and laid it on the table.
Okay. So if you could show the jury then what's inside the kit.
So inside of the kit, sorry, I'm trying to talk in the microphone here and show you. So inside of the kit, this is essentially what it looks like when you open it up. There's a blue piece of paper. It's an insert. It basically tells you the contents of the kit, what's inside of it. There are these two little plastic vials, which are used for urine sample collection. And in my almost 8 years of law enforcement, I've never collected urine on a chemical test. Also inside of the box, there are the blood tubes. They come in this little piece of cardboard. Take the blood tube out. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's like a little bit of like a powdery type agent in the bottom of the tube. That's essentially to keep the blood fresh. There's two tubes. They come like this. Also in the kit is the alcohol and drug determination sheet. This is carbon copy paperwork. There's 3 copies. It says on the bottom, the white copy, submit with the kit, the yellow copy, retained by the agency. So they're just like this. Sorry, there's 2 copies, not 3. Carbon copy. One goes with the kit, one gets retained by the agency.
And that's paperwork you have to fill out on the scene?
Correct.
What else is in the kit, Deputy?
There are labels for the specimens. So these labels get filled out by me, and then they get affixed to the side of the blood tubes by the phlebotomist after the draw. Also is a iodine prep pad. This is no alcohol. This is what gets used on the site when the phlebotomist does the draw, just so there's no questions about if there's going to be alcohol used on that site.
So just to back up to clarify that. So that's an iodine wipe that's included in the kit?
Correct.
And that you give that to the person who does the blood draw, the phlebotomist or the nurse?
Yes, sir.
And so that's so that the requirement is met that when the site is sterilized, there's no alcohol used?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What else is in the kit, Deputy?
There is a plastic bag with a big warning label on it. The reason for the big warning label is, as you can see, there is a small piece of almost like cloth in the bag. The reason for this being in the bag is if one of these blood tubes breaks while in this bag, this actual piece of cloth will absorb the blood and it can actually still be tested by the lab. So it's important that this actual piece actually gets left in there.
And what's the big warning label?
So the big warning label, it says, important, place blood tube holder containing filled blood tubes along with filled specimen bottles inside Ziploc bag, then squeeze out all excess air in closed bag. Note, do not remove liquid absorbing sheet.
Is there any other paperwork in the kit?
There is a shipping seal for when you're done.
Okay.
You can box everything back up.
All right. So initially, all right, well, wait to box it back.
All right.
So initially when you arrive, Deputy Flint opens the kit, begins to unpack the paperwork. So
Correct.
Specifically the blood alcohol determination sheet.
Correct.
And what do you do with the paperwork?
So at that time, I take the paperwork and I start filling it out.
And where are you physically in the hospital as you're doing this?
So we are in the back of the emergency room in front of the seclusion room.
Okay. And you just have the kit unpacked on a table outside the seclusion room?
Correct.
Okay. And so at this point, you're waiting on someone to come do the blood draw?
Yes.
Okay. What happens then?
We wait for the phlebotomist to actually come down from upstairs, and at that time we get moved to one of the actual emergency beds because the nurses and the doctor, they're aware that she actually needs some medical treatment for her wrist and from just the high collision impact of the crash. So we get moved to an emergency room. The phlebotomist meets us at the emergency room and then conducts the blood draw.
Okay. So at some point, you have to pack up the kit and move it to another room?
Correct.
So at that point, the paperwork is filled out and you're just waiting.
Correct.
So you used the demonstrative and you showed the jury what's all in the kit, but the specific kit that you had that day, is there any notable differences between it and the one you unpacked here in court today?
No, all the contents were the same.
Okay. Having done dozens of these before, was there anything about that kit that was dissimilar or incongruous to the kits you've seen before?
No, it was the same as any other kit I've seen.
Specifically as to the tubes, did you have an opportunity to inspect those?
I did take a look at them. Came just like this.
Okay. So the tubes appeared intact,
Everything was intact and everything was there.
and they appeared to have the seals intact and the preservatives in.
Correct.
So you had mentioned about the labels that come to go on the tubes. What at the site is done with those?
So at the site, they're filled out by me, and then I typically allow the phlebotomist to fill in the time, just so all the times are consistent with everything.
And so those tubes, those are just glass tubes, they don't have labels on them?
They do have something on them, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really know what it means. Just some
Like a small label? that's
yeah,
already
just a
affixed.
small. It's got some medical type language on there.
Is that something you can fill out or just something that's already pre-printed?
That's just already on there.
Already pre-printed instructions or warnings or something like that?
Yeah. Potassium fluoride.
All right. And so,
Sodium fluoride, sorry.
no problem. And so you fill out the labels and affix them?
Correct.
And you did that in this case?
Correct.
And what kind of information goes on the label?
The label is the subject's name. It has the date. It has the name of the person that's actually doing the draw, and then it has the officer's name, the time, and the date.
So you fill out your portion of it and allow the phlebotomist to complete their portion, their name and the time?
Correct.
And that's what happened in this case?
Yes.
Once the phlebotomist arrived in this case, what did you do with her initially?
Well, provided her with the paperwork and just showed her where I needed her signature for her to sign.
Does she have her own hospital paperwork?
She does.
And you assisted her with filling that out?
Yes.
Because some of that you get a copy of and some of it the hospital gets a copy of?
Correct. Her name needs to go on that paperwork.
So at some point, do you give the tubes from the kit to the phlebotomist?
I do.
And then you stay with her?
Yes.
You stay present during the blood draw?
Yes.
And she conducts her portion of the blood draw?
Correct.
Were you able to observe her label the tubes when she completed the draw?
Yes.
What time was the draw completed?
I believe it was shortly after 6:30 that day.
As to the actual draw itself, did you observe anything out of the ordinary from other blood draws you've attended?
No.
Okay. Deputy, what's a FSD 93 form?
An FSD 93. Would that be the alcohol determination form?
If that's the number at the top, I know it by its number.
Yes, that would be this form.
Okay, so that's the paperwork you fill out and put back in the...
Correct. This goes back in the box. One copy, and then the other copy I retain.
All right. And those are standardized throughout the state of Michigan?
Correct.
They're provided in every kit?
Yes.
So once the phlebotomist completes the draw, you see her label the tubes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you see her do anything else as it pertains to the draw on the tubes?
She inverted the tubes multiple times.
And what's the purpose of that?
I believe it has something to do with shaking the sediment that's in the tube before placing it back in the holder.
The cardboard holder?
Correct.
At some point, do you receive the tubes back from her?
I do.
And you have an opportunity to inspect them again?
I do.
And they still look in order? No scratches, dents, breaks?
They look the same to me as when I got them,
Except for the blood inside.
except for the blood.
What do you do then with the kit?
And then take the tubes that are packaged just like this. They go back. They go in the plastic bag that's provided along with that little absorbing sheet. Everything goes back into the kit. The paperwork, iodine pad was already used, so that doesn't go back in.
What about the labels? Are they on the tubes at this point?
They are. They provide 2 sets of labels, so 2 are for urine samples, 2 are for blood samples.
Okay.
And then when everything's back in the kit, and then the kit gets closed, then the shipping seal gets affixed to the other side here.
And that's the opposite side of where the initial, you can seal it up for me, Deputy.
Okay.
And so at this point, it's a little bit after 6:30, you're still at the hospital.
Correct.
This crash was at 3:01.
Correct.
What do you do with the kit for the remainder of the time you're at the hospital?
Hang on to it in my possession.
How much longer were you at the hospital, do you know?
I believe until shortly after 9 p.m.
Why so long?
Well, the defendant needed to get medical attention on her wrist. She also got x-rays on her head and neck. She got her wrist set a few different times, so it took a while for all that to happen before we could get discharged from the hospital.
You eventually got discharged a little after 9 p.m.
Correct.
At that point, do you proceed to the sheriff's office?
I do.
And defendant's handed off to some other deputy, is that correct?
Correct.
Are you still in possession of the blood kit at that time?
I am.
What's the sheriff's department policy for those once you get back to the office with one?
So these blood kits get placed into an evidence locker at the sheriff's office, just like any other piece of evidence. There's a wall at the sheriff's office. There's approximately 40 or so evidence lockers. You put the piece of property in there, you close the door. There's a key that's already sticking out of the locker, so you know that that locker's open. You can put something in there. I close it, turn the key, and then there's a key slot, and the only person that has access at that time would be who's in charge of our evidence. So it would have been Detective Martin at that time.
Okay. And you did that all with this blood kit?
Correct.
Do you know about what time you would have done that?
I'm not entirely sure.
What time did you leave for the night after a long shift?
Somewhere around 10 or 11, somewhere around there.
So is it fair to say you would have put this in the evidence locker close to immediately after getting back to the sheriff's office?
Yes, as soon as I got there, the defendant was handed off to another deputy. I then proceeded to park the vehicle, go upstairs, place the kit in evidence, and then start on my paperwork.
Okay. Deputy, are you assigned a body-worn camera?
I am.
And was that active that day on April 20th, 2024?
It was.
And was all of this that we've talked about recorded on the body-worn camera?
It was.
Were there any exceptions to the quality or nature of the video?
Yes, at some points the video was muted, but it was still on.
Okay, why was it muted?
There were times during the course of this incident where I was talking to other officers and the camera was muted. It's a mistake of my own. It should have been audio recording the entire time, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the whole incident was recorded with video.
Okay. At some point, do you, later on in the video, do you zip up your coat over the video?
Yes.
Okay. And that's toward the end of the video, probably past 8 o'clock.
Yes, that's probably somewhere around the medical treatment portion.
Okay. So, Judge, we've broken up Deputy Schmidt's body camera into 4 parts, both for time concerns, relevance, and other issues surrounding admissibility. Exhibit 6A is Deputy Schmidt's time at the scene. 6B, we believe right now is inadmissible, but may become admissible later. And 6C and D document the blood draw. So at this time, I would just move to proffer 6B. But have A, C, and D admitted.
Not admitted, but proper, so we can lodge it.
Yes, that's what he's saying.
But I'm also going to move to admit A and C without claim. They're as I described. But I don't think it has a lot of value in the midst of the trial to show them.
Okay. All right, A and C are admitted. D may be shown. Thank you.
You already drove it before and so the patient will be done?
That were drawn blood? Yeah. That's all. What was your last name? M-U-N-D-Y. Thank you. This is
Am I the witness to take you against or signing?
yeah. I guess you just have to sign your name, the time, and your blood.
William, 847, Blank 4.
Whatever time just rolls. Yeah. Her name goes in there, right? Her name goes right here. The person correct? Yeah. No, I think that's the name of the person that I'm just asking to confirm if that form is here. Yeah, that right.
Is it C-H-I-D-E-S-T-E-R?
Yes. And then this is the... Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Oh, yeah. That should be on the table. What's that? Yeah. Nice, yeah. Sorry.
No, not you. You hit me. Yeah, like I did.
I'm just saying. What was your first name? Wrong. We'll see if that's me. I thought I hadn't mentioned before.
Me too. It's going to be right here, right?
There you are. Won't too many words.
Yeah, good one. So I come in and it's one more chance.
I feel like I'm kind of just in the middle.
Yeah, okay.
I'm good. I'm good to hear. I'm good to hear. Wait for it. Who's the doc right now?
Let me see which one is on her versus
Just so you know, she's just going to use an iodine swab, just no alcohol or anything.
shaking. I can't look. No, I can't even look. Sorry, look here. Dead body walker.
I can always do that though.
You do? Okay. Let's just do that.
It's the last 2 weeks of my semester.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
So, Deputy, as to that, I can't not ask, what was that noise throughout that video?
There was somebody in the ER room next to us.
Just another patient
Yes.
vocalizing.
Yes.
And at one point you asked the front desk, who's the doc? What
Yes.
do you mean by that?
Whoever the doctor in charge of the unit would have been at that time.
Is that because you have to put the supervising physician into your paperwork?
Yes, that needs to go on the search warrant.
Okay. And all that, as well as the other portions of your body camera, those are fair and accurate representations of what you saw that day?
Yes,
You had an opportunity to review them
I did.
and review their edits that have been being submitted in court today?
Yes.
Move for admission of A, C, and D.
A and C have already been admitted. S to D. People 6D is admitted.
And I just note that the foundation for 6B is laid should it become admissible without recalling Deputy Schmidt.
Okay. No further questions, Judge. Cross.
My blessings go out to the medical profession that can put up with that kind of noise and racket all night. Deputy, it's detective, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
My name is Bill Clovis, and I represent Marshella Chidester, and you're aware of that, right?
Yes.
We met before, back June 27th of last year, before Judge Brown, during the preliminary examination, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I asked you at that time if you shook, you shaken the vials of blood with the preservative that's at the bottom. I believe you described it as white powder. And your answer, would you agree, was no, you never shook them?
Correct.
Okay. And when you noted in one of the reports or whatever, or checklists that are given to you to fill out, you filled out the checklist with regard to the boxes of the draw, or did somebody else fill those out?
What do you mean?
Did you fill out any forms at all concerning the blood draw?
Yes, the hospital forms and.
Okay. And then you signed it as the officer in charge right then. Is that correct?
I probably did.
Okay. All right. And are you aware that these vials of blood, that white powdery substance is a preservative to preserve, and so it would not ferment the blood?
As far as what I know, I'm not a medical professional, but I can agree to that.
And thank you for being honest on it.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm not a doctor either. So it's your understanding that there's a preservative in there, and it's got to be shaken. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And did you ever see, because I just watched the videotape, that's why I got up, my eyes aren't the best to watch it close. Did you ever see anybody, you didn't, you said, did you see anybody shake it like this?
The phlebotomist inverted them.
And you used the word inverted, that she took them and she inverted them, correct? That's what it showed, at least I could
Correct.
see.
She took them completely upside down.
It looked like there wasn't multiple times. Would you agree with that?
Well, she did directly after and then before putting them back in the
Did it look like
cardboard.
before she put them away that she turned them like this and then put them in there?
Possibly.
I know you're not a medical person, but you like to follow procedure, correct?
Correct.
And the procedure you took part in is having the blood drawn, preserving it, and then having it sent to the Michigan State Police toxicology lab, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, would you agree that if the preservative is not properly mixed, that would cause fermentation?
Objection.
And if you don't know,
Deputy Schmidt's not qualified to answer that.
Response.
I'll withdraw. Thank you, Judge. Now, while you're at the hospital, before you went to the hospital with my client, where was she for those about 3.5 hours?
From the time from when we left the scene until like the hospital, you mean?
Did you stop at the police station or sheriff's station at all? Did you go straight from the scene at Swan Boat Club to the hospital?
No, the scene to the hospital.
Okay. And how long were you at the hospital with Marshella Chidester?
A long time.
Would you say at least 2 hours or 3 hours?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Okay. Did you mark when you arrived at the hospital?
It's our protocol whenever we leave somewhere, we tell dispatch. Wherever we arrive somewhere, we tell dispatch.
There was none of the documents. It's okay. You didn't mark down anywhere on the documents, or there's nowhere to mark on the documents?
No, I did not mark anywhere.
Why did it take so long to get this blood draw that we watched a few minutes ago?
So, obviously going back to the scene after she was in custody, first off, I wanted to make sure that all of my fellow officers that were on scene, all the medical personnel were taken care of. They didn't need any help and I could leave.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh.
What I meant was once you got to the hospital, you were at the hospital for 2-3 hours.
Correct.
Okay. Why didn't you get a blood test right then and there when you came in?
So I needed to fill out the paperwork for the search warrant.
You did that while you were at the hospital?
Yes, I was seated in my vehicle.
Okay. Of course, we weren't there, so that's why I'm asking so many questions to try to put this back together again. When you had replied that it was 2-3 hours, I'm looking at a short tape, and it looks like that's when you just walked right in.
No, we were there for a few hours.
Okay, all right, both in your patrol car and then inside the hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was my client getting any treatment for foot or arms injuries?
She did after the blood draw was completed.
At the hospital, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Now, after you arrived and you were going to get to the hospital and start filling out the paperwork or the search warrant paperwork or affidavit in support, why did you go back to the sheriff's office and do, commonly known as or formally known as a data master breathalyzer that you usually do for people suspected of drunk driving? Why wouldn't you take her for that too?
For this case, with the serious injuries that were potentially had there, my command wanted to make sure that we did a blood draw.
Okay. But why wouldn't you do the breathalyzer? Would you say you do breathalyzer about 90% of the time of people suspicion of drinking and driving?
No. A majority of my chemical tests are blood.
Okay. Is it because people refuse the breathalyzer?
Sometimes they refuse, sometimes they're not compliant. There's a variable of circumstances that it could be.
But if you read that you said DI 177, am I correct?
Correct.
If you read that, it says, take a breathalyzer, urine test, or blood test, or else you may or you will lose your license. Is that correct? But that's
correct.
Right, you read?
Somewhere
in a synopsis.
In a synopsis.
All right. And you read that to her?
Correct.
And she said, yes, I'll take whatever test or whatever you wanted her to do?
Yes.
Okay. So you didn't file with the Secretary of State a refusal or any of that stuff?
No.
She was very cooperative, correct?
Yes, she was cooperative.
And she was understanding what you were asking her and saying to her, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so again, why wouldn't you take her first for the breathalyzer to blow into that takes 2 samples, I believe, and then take her for blood? I don't know if he fully answered it, Judge. I'm just going to ask it this
I'm going to sustain the objection. He did answer. He said the policy of fatalities was to take a blood test.
Okay. Now, after you received the blood and you put it in this, what do you call that?
Michigan State Police blood kit.
Blood kit. All right. Once you put it back in the blood kit box, did you refrigerate it?
No.
Do you, now this camera that's muted, it wasn't muted during the last film that we watched, correct?
I think there might have been parts where it was at points.
Was it muted at the time you were at the scene?
It was.
Why would you mute your body camera?
At that time, I was having some conversations with other officers.
And you didn't want anyone to know what you were saying?
I don't think he finished the
Oh,
answer.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Go ahead and finish.
I was having private conversations with other officers at the scene.
And you didn't want anybody to hear what those private conversations were, correct?
Well, there's no policy against muting our cameras.
Oh, so there's no policy with the Monroe County Sheriff that you can mute or shut off your camera anytime you want?
Not shut off. While we're still having citizen contact, we still have to have our cameras on.
So you can mute anytime you feel it's proper, or anytime that you want to mute it, you can mute it.
A camera can be muted, yes. But it still stays on.
The camera still stays on, but it's muted.
Correct.
And how do you mute this body camera?
There's a button on the side that you hold down and it mutes it.
So it's something of an intentional act.
Yes.
And you were, at the time that this took place, that you were investigating, were you an officer, was it 7 or 8 years?
Just under 8 years. My 8-year mark will be May of this year.
And you were an officer for 5 years for the city of Riverview?
No, about 8 to 9 months at the city of Riverview.
And that was during your probation period of time of 12 months?
Correct.
And is there any reason why you left or were terminated after 9 months?
No, actually, I left on my own accord there.
And was that an agreement that you would sign papers that you were leaving on your own?
Yes.
Now, as to these sobriety tests that you spoke of earlier, there's the national highway ones, correct? That are
Correct.
approved, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with any law or Court of Appeal laws that says that the dexterity test, the finger or pencil test in front of the eye, is not as accurate?
Objection. Calls
Okay,
for
I'll
legal
withdraw.
opinion.
I'll withdraw.
It's a test that he didn't testify that he gave.
I'll withdraw. Okay. You gave the alphabet test, correct?
Correct.
And the purpose of the alphabet test is to see if somebody, their sobriety and level of sobriety, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And my client completed the alphabet test completely, clearly, understandably, with no problem, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you noted that in the report, correct?
Correct.
And was your camera on to record, was the voice on or was it muted at that time?
It was on. It was muted at that time.
It was what?
It was muted at that
The
time.
video was on, but it was muted.
Correct.
So any documentation to back up that she completed the alphabet, we don't have that other than your testimony, correct?
Correct. And my
Okay. Now, the numbers. Did you ask her, my client, to count from 1 to 100?
No.
Okay. You asked her to count backwards from 100, was it to 88?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. And you said the first time she counted 100 to what?
91.
Okay. And could you understand her?
At that time, yes.
Okay. She wasn't slurring, correct?
Not that I recall.
Okay. And that would be something you'd put down in a report as a trained officer, correct? Observations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I presume your report is honest, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now, you knew that my client was just involved in a major collision, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you knew from investigating when you got there that my client went through the wall and went about 25 feet into the location of the Swan Boat Club, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you think that would shake anybody up a little bit of
Objection. Calls for speculation. Response.
Have you, I'll withdraw that and then lay a foundation.
Okay,
Thank you. You've investigated many accidents, correct?
Correct.
As a patrol officer, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've investigated major collisions, I presume, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And after somebody, in your experience, after somebody has been in a major collision or mid-collision or major, do they seem shaken up at all?
Yes, at times I do.
Do you consider this a major collision?
Yes.
Now, you said that you didn't give my client the one leg stand test. Is that when you asked somebody that you're investigating to raise their one leg off the ground maybe 5-6 inches and hold it and count maybe 1,000, 2,000 to 9 or 10?
Correct. It's up to 30, but it's the same.
And sometimes you say keep counting until I tell you to stop.
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't give that based upon her neuropathy?
Correct. I just didn't feel she was safe to be able to complete that test without potentially falling and hurting herself.
You have no proof that my client doesn't have neuropathy, correct? You have
Objection. It's a double negative. If you
Well-
can ask that question directly.
What's a double negative?
I'll withdraw it. Thank you, Judge. Do you have any proof that she has neuropathy?
At that time?
Yes.
At that time, I did not.
Do you now believe she has neuropathy?
I haven't seen her since. I don't know.
Have you seen her walk today?
Today, I have not seen her walk.
Now, the walk and turn. Excuse me. Is that when you ask a person that you're investigating, believing they may have consumed alcohol, to put their heel to the front of their toe of their shoe and walk like that, one behind the other, for 9 steps?
Correct.
Okay. And then you ask them to turn around and then do 9 steps back, correct?
Yes, to take a small series of steps and get themselves turned around and then 9 back towards the start.
Okay. And you didn't ask my client to take that because of her safety, correct?
Correct.
And you don't want her falling down, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And she was able to understand all of your directions, correct?
Yes.
She told you what her name was, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did she or did you know that she was a former Commodore of the Boat Club?
No, I had no idea.
Okay. Now, when you took her to the hospital, well, was she unruly in your car at all?
No.
Do you have cameras that sort of flip around and record somebody in the back?
Unfortunately, our county police cars, we don't have in-vehicle cameras.
You don't have dash cams?
No. We just have the body cameras that are affixed to us.
Okay. So she was not unruly in the back seat of the car, correct, while you're transporting her?
She was cooperative.
Okay. So she was making a lot of noise, screaming, yelling, none of that craziness, right?
No.
Okay. Was she falling asleep in the back seat?
I don't recall.
Okay. Was she vomiting in the back seat?
No.
Did she vomit in the hospital?
No.
You had mentioned that earlier, and I'm just asking about it. Did she urinate on herself in the patrol car?
No.
And you said that's one other thing that you look at is vomiting, urination on their clothes or in their clothes.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. And the higher the alleged blood alcohol content is, the more people do these things. Would you agree? Such as urinate, their bodily, control is not there.
Well, I think everybody has their own alcohol tolerance up to a point.
But would you agree from all of your arrests that you've done or investigations that usually urination, vomiting, it occurs when somebody's ingested a lot of alcohol than just a little bit?
Yes.
How long did it take you to obtain a search warrant from the time you arrived and put her in the back seat of the car?
I don't recall the exact amount of time.
Okay. In your past history as a patrol officer, when you pull somebody over of suspicion of drunk driving and you want to get a search warrant done, are they usually done like within an hour?
Yeah, I would say for the most part that's pretty accurate.
And this was 6:30 in the evening, early evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the magistrate or judge is usually at home and it's sent to him or her, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then they review it, they sign it, and then they send it back to you?
Correct, via email.
And then you give it to the hospital?
Yes.
And sometimes that's done within, would you say 45 minutes, an hour?
Yeah, sometimes that's about right.
Is some of the statements in the affidavit sort of fill in the blank?
Yes.
When you approached my client inside the vehicle, did you see a cane that she uses for walking?
I don't recall.
Do you know if the airbags went off?
I don't recall.
Do you think airbags that go off or a collision into a wall, in your experience of patrol officer investigating accidents, do you think that running into a wall and going 25 feet inside a building, that type of a collision that you've investigated, that sometimes people don't have all their faculties immediately afterwards?
Objection calls for speculation.
In his history, Your Honor, you know, he's investigated accidents.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, when you arrived at the scene, it was some confusion going on. Do you agree? I mean, we saw tapes earlier yesterday. It looked, I don't mean to use the word craziness, but it was crazy what was going on, right?
There were
tables all over. There's a vehicle inside. People are injured. 2 little children are severely injured or critically injured. It was chaos.
It was the most chaotic scene of my almost 8-year career.
Of your career. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
It's okay.
You were involved in it. So, do you agree that the containers, were those little like red Solo cups that they serve, or do they serve something else with those? In other words, were there any containers that looked like at one time they had fluid in it, and they're all over the place, food's everywhere, there's containers to drink?
Are you talking about,
Sorry, I've got to object. One, it's a civil facts, not in evidence. I don't know what Mr. Close is talking about.
You know, Judge, I'll withdraw.
Objection.
I was going to say,
You're going to withdraw, then
okay.
on we go.
All right, thank you. When you arrived on the scene of the Swan Boat Club, and it was shortly after 3 o'clock, correct?
Correct.
On April 20th, 24.
Correct.
Okay. Was everything in disarray?
From what I saw, yes.
You just talked about it's probably the most horrific
Yes.
scene you've seen.
Correct.
And was there food and cups all over?
So I never actually made it into the bar area.
How about where the tables were?
I don't even recall where the tables were in that building.
Because it was so chaotic or so messy, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
And I'm just going by, the prosecutor showed some tapes yesterday and I'm trying to refresh or, you know, talk about it verbally. Did you ask the hospital while you were there with the this blood kit to take additional blood from my client and have it tested by the hospital?
No, I did not.
And then what was the date that this kit expires?
I do not recall.
Okay. So you don't know if it was expired or not, correct?
Well, if the hospital had it there, then it would have been up to date.
Based upon the hospital has it there, so they do no wrong, it's got to be up to date. Is that correct?
No, that's not what.
Calls for speculation.
Well, he just said.
I think he testified he doesn't know, so that answers the question.
I don't have any other questions, Judge.
Very well.
Thank you, Officer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge. So, Deputy, I'm going to show you this form. This is just another FSD 93, like the one you packed into the kit. Is that identical to the same type of form?
Yes, this is the exact same form.
Okay. So that's a carbon pack, but it's also a two-sided form. Is that right?
Correct.
So on the front is information you fill out. What's on the back?
So the back is the form instructions for the FSD 093, which is this form.
Okay. And toward the middle of the page, it says guidelines.
Yes.
And it says guide.
Objection, Your Honor. This isn't part of the original examination, right? He's going outside. He's already had his chance to ask these questions.
Response.
This is in response to Mr. Clovis's going down the road of, did you shake the vials?
All right, I'll accept it. I'll accept the answer.
So there's instructions that are titled to the medical professional physician. Is that right?
Correct.
Do any of those pertain to what to do with the preservative in the vials?
Yes.
Which one? I believe it's number 2 or 3.
So 2 is draw 2 tubes of venous blood from subject in presence of a law enforcement officer and tell the subject in the officer's presence that no alcohol was used in sterilizing the skin surface, needle, or syringe.
And what about the next one?
3 is slowly invert blood sample tubes enough times to distribute the sodium fluoride, potassium oxalate preservative.
And that's the instructions for that on the state form, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So it's not shake the tube 3 times, or you're ordered to shake the tube, or there's any statute that requires you to do that, right?
No.
I'm sorry, into the mic.
I'm really sorry. The mic is no. There's not.
Okay. And then that's not something you would do anyway. That's something the phlebotomist would do.
Correct. I've never done that once on a OWI blood draw.
Okay. And you saw the phlebotomist do it in this case.
Yes.
So you're satisfied that the guidelines on the back of that form were complied with?
Objection, Your Honor, that's for the jury.
No, it's not a legal conclusion or a factual conclusion. It's he has to make sure those guidelines are complied with before he leaves the hospital.
I think the question is he satisfied? I'll overrule the objection and take the answer whether he's satisfied.
I was satisfied with the conclusion of that.
Thank you. So as to the timelines Mr. Clovis was getting into, once you arrive at the hospital and check in, do you have any authority over those folks?
No.
Is it fair to say that you are at the mercy of the hospital as to when that draw gets completed?
Yes.
Were you that day?
Yes.
Mr. Clovis asked you if you asked for the hospital to draw her blood and independently test it for you. Have you ever done that in your 9-year career?
No, not in my 8-year career. I have not.
Okay. Do you know if the hospital will do that for you?
I don't know.
Do you know of any officer who has ever asked the hospital to do that and had it be successful?
Objection as to relevancy, what other officers do.
I'm going to sustain that. I think we made it clear.
Fair enough. As to your body camera deputy, throughout the course of the day, you muted and unmuted this, I think you testified to. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think you indicated under cross-exam with Mr. Clovis that that was to have private conversations. Is that correct?
Yes.
When you say that, what generally do you mean by a private conversation?
Well, in terms of that scene there, more or less trying to figure out from the other officers what I need to do, what they're currently doing, things that I don't believe are necessarily relevant to the public hearing them.
And so those are more, so what you're saying is those are more, not administrative, but course of conduct type of conversations with fellow officers.
Correct.
So when you say private conversation, you're not talking about each other's significant others at the scene.
No, we're talking about the scene and what needs to be done and where we're at with it.
Mr. Clovis asked you if in a crash like that, you think somebody would get quote unquote shaken up by the crash. Did the defendant appear shaken up by the crash to you?
Besides the injuries that she sustained, there was no other indication that she was shaken up from the crash.
Mr. Clovis also asked you as to the sobriety testing and things like that, if the defendant followed all of your instructions. As to the horizontal gaze nystagmus, did she follow all of your instructions?
She was not able to focus on my stimuli, which is part of the instructions.
Okay. Did she turn her head to attempt to follow your finger?
Yes.
Okay. Is that part of the instructions?
Yes.
Did she follow that part?
No.
Okay. No further redirect, Judge. Thank you.
Recross.
Now, you stated earlier, officer, that my client had a test. Was it a CAT scan?
Objection. No, he didn't.
Okay. I'll withdraw it. That she came in for head injuries at all?
Correct.
You mentioned that?
Yes.
Remember that? Okay. And then you asked her to do what type of test, and she wasn't able to follow it. What type of test was that?
An eye test?
Right. And she wasn't able to totally focus clearly after the accident, correct?
She was not.
Test?
I'm sorry, what?
To do that test. She wasn't able to clearly focus to do that test right after the accident.
Objection calls for speculation.
Was she able to do it? I mean,
That's a fair question. Go ahead.
She wasn't able to complete the test.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
All right, may this witness be satisfied? He can step down. We ask that his subpoena is still active.
Okay.
He called for rebuttal.
All right, which means you cannot stand in court. You're all set.
Thank you, sir.
You may be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Your next witness.
Judge, people call Deputy Dominic Flint.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Sir.
Deputy, if you would state your full name and then spell your last name for us, please.
Deputy Dominic Flint, Flint.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Deputy, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you held that position?
6 years into this month.
And did you hold any law enforcement positions before the Sheriff's Office?
No,
And do you have all the training, qualifications, and certifications necessary to be a peace officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
And were those up to date and in order on April 20th of last year?
Yes.
Speak into the microphone for me if you could, Deputy. Sorry. I can hear you, but I know.
Sure,
folks
yeah.
can't. Were you working on April 20th of last year?
I was.
And did you receive any dispatches or assignments that day that brought you here to testify?
I did.
What was the nature of that?
The nature of my specific assignment on that day, I received a phone call from Supervisor Sergeant Bomia to assist Deputy Schmidt at the hospital with the defendant.
And what was the nature of the... That's what you were actually going to do, but what was the purpose of the assignment?
It was basically extra security, another set of eyes on the defendant and the evidence that we collected there.
Okay. Did you proceed to the hospital?
I did.
And did you interact with Deputy Schmidt that day?
I did.
And did you have any interaction with the blood draw kit?
I did.
What was the nature of that interaction?
Upon receiving the blood draw kit from the medical staff at the hospital, I broke the seal on it, took the papers and vials out of the blood kit and organized them for Deputy Schmidt to fill out on the table.
Deputy, in your 6 years as a sheriff, have you ever dealt with a blood draw kit before?
I have.
About how many times?
Close to 30.
And was there anything different about this kit than any of the kits you've dealt with in the past?
No.
Did it appear in order?
Yes.
Outside of yourself and Deputy Schmidt, did anyone have any interaction with the kit before you left the hospital?
No.
And did you stay for the full time at the hospital up until the blood draw?
No, I was pulled for other duties.
Okay. Do you know what time you left?
I don't.
Okay.
No, probably about an hour and a half to an hour 45 after we got there.
Okay. So probably about 6:15.
Sounds about right, yeah.
No other questions for Deputy Flint, Judge?
Cross. Thank you. May this witness be excused.
From the people, yes.
Thank you, Deputy. Your shoes. Next witness.
Judge, people call Deputy Cody Karina next.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Sir. Deputy, if you would state your name and then spell your last name for us, please.
Cody Karina. Last name is spelled C-A-R-E-N-A.
Thank you, Judge. Deputy, how are you employed?
I'm employed by the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your position?
I'm a deputy sheriff.
How long have you been in that role?
I've been employed by the Monroe County Sheriff's Office for approximately 5 years.
Did you have law enforcement experience prior to that?
I did. I worked for the Erie Township Police Department for approximately 4.5 years, and then the Chippewa County Sheriff's Office for a couple of months.
Is that the extent of your law enforcement experience?
It is.
All told, how long have you been in law enforcement?
Almost 10 years.
Do you hold all the training, education, certification necessary to be a peace officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
Were those up to date on April 20th of 2024?
They were.
Were you on duty on April 20th of 2024?
I was.
What was your assignment on that date?
I was assigned to the Road Patrol Division that day.
And at some point on that day, were you dispatched to Swan Boat Club?
I was.
Do you recall what that dispatch was?
The dispatch was for a vehicle that had crashed into the side of the Swan Boat Club. While I was en route there, we were notified that at least one child was deceased.
And what did you observe when you arrived at the Swan Boat Club?
It was very chaotic. Multiple law enforcement agencies were there, multiple fire departments. Life Flight was trying to land. Law enforcement was trying to corral, witnesses and victims together. It was just very chaotic.
Did you inside the boat club?
Eventually I did.
How did you enter into the boat club?
I entered through the hole that was on the side of the boat club.
That is the hole that the vehicle created?
That's correct.
And what did you observe when you went inside the boat club?
Tables and chairs were kind of thrown about. The bar area looked like it was damaged, and there was also a vehicle against one of the walls.
How did you come to interact with the defendant?
I was tasked with going to interview her.
What did you do at this point?
I went to a patrol car that the defendant was in and proceeded with an interview.
And so you spoke to the defendant?
I did.
Did you observe any signs of intoxication?
I observed the odor of intoxicants coming from the back of the vehicle, the back of the patrol car, and I also observed that the defendant had bloodshot eyes.
And so what did you do next?
I interviewed the defendant.
Are you issued a body-worn camera?
I am.
And was it functional and operational on that day?
It was.
Did you have an opportunity to review that footage, Deputy?
I did.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what you saw on that day?
It is.
And the video that we are going to proffer for the jury, it has been edited?
It has.
Was that to remove anything that's inadmissible in court today?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, was that edited about 70 seconds or so?
Yes.
And you didn't turn your camera off during that time, correct?
My camera was not turned off during that time.
So your camera was active. It was simply deleted for today's footage?
That's correct.
Okay. Judge, at this point, I'm going to move to admit and proffer to the jury Exhibit 7.
Just ask the unit doing payments, so wait until I got down.
Just go ahead and show.
Is there handcuffs? I gotta move this, okay. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him or her present while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any question if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise your rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. Do you understand what I just read to you?
Yes.
Okay. Do you wish to speak to me?
Pardon?
Do you wish to speak to me? Or do you want to have a...
No, I'm ready.
Like, do you want to talk or not?
I'm just hoping no one was hurt.
Yeah, sure. So can I talk to you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So run through the medications that you told me about again.
Gabapentin. I have a whole list of medications. I don't have them on me right now.
Do you list of medications in the car?
No.
Okay. Okay, so what happened today? Where were we at today?
I went to lunch with some friends.
Okay, about what time was that?
Noonish.
Okay, so around when you went to lunch, remember what you ate?
Yeah, I had some chili and a fish sandwich.
A fish sandwich? Okay. Where was that at?
At Furnace.
At Verna's? What did you drink? Did you drink water, pot? Anything?
I had a glass of wine.
Just one glass of wine?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you had one glass of wine at Verna's. After that, what happened? Did you leave at noon? Where did you go?
Came home.
Okay.
I just live right down the street.
Okay. What's your address?
6260.
60 Time Ranch House?
Yeah.
Okay. So you get home, what do you do when you get home?
I just came home and just kind of chilled out and was waiting for my husband to get up and take a nap.
Okay. Did you drink anything else there?
No, I didn't even get a drink down here because I never made it this far.
When do you take your medication?
8 o'clock.
8 a.m.?
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that chili and fish, is there did you eat anything else today?
No.
Okay. Okay, and then where were you driving to?
Just from Furnace to here.
To here? What were you coming here for?
Home.
Oh, you're going from Furnace to home?
Yeah.
And you left Furnace at noon?
Yes.
Okay. But then you said you went home first?
I'm home here.
Oh, okay. So you were trying to go from Furnace to home?
Yes.
How long were you at Furnace then?
Maybe an hour, not even that long.
Okay. So you made no stops between Furnace and here?
No.
And when did you go to Furnace again?
About noon.
About noon. Okay. 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 Do you remember what happened when you were going around here?
No, not really. I pulled into the parking lot and I thought I was driving up to the boat club and evidently I was driving right to the pavilion.
Which direction did you drive?
So I live right down the street.
Okay, so you were coming from that way?
Yes.
This way? When you got to the parking lot, what happened?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you think there's a reason you don't remember? Did something happen or?
You know what? I have these seizures and
Okay. Do you have anything where it says like maybe that, you know, or the doctor told you to drive and everything?
I'm cleared to drive now, and I don't have my purse with me, but I do have a card in my purse.
Okay. When's the last time you had a seizure that you know of?
March.
In March? Okay. So in March, the last time you remember that you had a seizure.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to did you were you hospitalized for it?
Yes.
You were?
Yes.
Okay, was that you had like at home or something?
No, I was in Monroe for 4 days and Toledo for 6 days.
So did you have a seizure while you were at home? Or did you have
I had it at home, and then I did have one when I was in the hospital.
in the hospital? Okay. And March is going to be the last time you had that seizure?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you think, is your normal behavior when you have a seizure, is it have lapses of memory?
Yes.
Like that? Okay. So once you got to the parking lot, you don't remember anything?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for you now. Deputy Schmidt's gonna take the over from here, okay? Is there, so on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being like you're stone cold sober, you can drive perfectly, 10 being you're passed out drunk, where do you think you're at right now?
7.
A 7? Okay. Do you think you're okay to drive?
I wouldn't want to drive.
You wouldn't let you drive?
No.
Okay. Okay, just give me 1 second, okay? Sorry, my phone's ringing, I think it's gonna be my boss. I apologize.
Again, move to admit people's proposed exhibit 7.
Sorry, no objection, Your Honor. All right, I didn't think of it. People 7 is admitted.
Deputy, to your knowledge, is your time stamp and date stamp on that correct?
It is correct.
All right. I have no further questions, Judge. Thank you.
Cross.
Officer, did you have a chance to follow up on my client and her medical records?
I did not.
Okay. Were you aware that she had a doctor's appointment in March of 24?
I was not.
Okay. Were you aware that her last episode of having any seizure was October of 23?
Objection, Your Honor, facts not in evidence.
Were you aware of it? That's all I asked. He interviewed the client.
Judge, if he wants to testify, he can call, he can be a witness and not an attorney. He can't do both.
I'm asking him the question if he is aware of it.
You can ask the question.
All right, sir.
Objection is overruled.
Thank you, Judge.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Were you aware that my client last episode was October of 23 of having a seizure?
I was not.
Okay. When you were investigating, as the tape was showing, were you aware that my client had gone through the Swan Boat Club building? That she went through the Swan Boat Club building? You're investigating the accident?
I was.
Okay. So were you aware of that? Yes?
I was.
Okay. And were you aware that her vehicle went 25 feet into the building, approximately?
I was.
And do you consider, with all of your experience over the years, that that's a major accident?
I would consider that a major accident, or a major crash.
Thank you. When you asked my client on the tape there that was recorded, well, let me strike that back up. How long after the crash do you believe you interviewed my client on that video?
I couldn't give an exact time. It would have to be an estimate.
Do you mind an estimate?
I'd say about 30 minutes, probably 20 to 30 minutes.
About 20 to 30 minutes after that crash, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That was commercial time, Judge. The sound came on. Okay. Do you agree that, like, after a major crash or collision, in your experience, if somebody's involved in going through a building and going 25 feet in, that they might not have all their faculties together as you and I sit here calmly talking, just in your experience?
It can happen.
Okay. And would you agree that when you ask them, are you okay to drive? Did you ask her, are you okay to drive because of the collision? Are you okay to drive because your vehicle's 25 feet in a building? Did you ask her any of that?
I just asked her if she felt like she was okay to drive.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And we heard it. I just want to confirm it if there was any other conversation. Is that, so you agree that what we heard is true? Is the only conversation you had with her about his driving and are you okay to drive?
I believe it was a follow-up question to the scale that I gave her from 0 to 10.
All right. And when you said on a scale of 1 to 10, do you think you should have waited a little bit longer than 20 minutes or 30 after this major crash occurred to wait till somebody that you would have settled down, get her thought process maybe better? and then ask her questions. Do you think that might be hindsight from your collision crash as you've investigated? Would have been better to sort of wait a little bit longer than right afterwards?
At the time when I was speaking to the defendant in the patrol car, she seemed like she had collected herself after the crash.
And she seemed like she was sober, right?
No.
She seemed like she collected her thoughts. I didn't hear any slurring. Did you hear any slurring?
There was no slurring of speech, but...
Okay, that's my question. I just want... There were no slurring, am I correct? We all heard it. Okay. And you said that she had collected her thoughts after she just went through this building. You felt she had collected her thoughts, right?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Deputy, when you were speaking with the defendant, did she seem shaken up to you?
No.
Is slurring of speech the only sign of intoxication?
No, that's just one of the general indicators of intoxication or impairment.
In your experience, how many years have you been an officer?
Approximately 10 years.
Do you have any idea how many drunk driving arrests you've been involved in?
Approximately 300 to 400.
And have you ever encountered a defendant or a suspect who was not slurring speech but was intoxicated still?
Yes, I have.
Deputy, I'm going to show you again the body cam video, please. Can you just start? You don't need to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, he's already covered this.
Judge, he brought up the time. We have the answer. The timestamp is accurate, so we're going to clarify approximately what exactly the time you talked to the defendant.
If he gives me a time, Judge, I might stipulate to it.
What about that?
I don't know it off the top of my head, Judge. I have to look. I don't have that memorized.
He's going, Your Honor. The officer already testified 20 to 30 minutes. End of story.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection. We've heard this.
All right, no further questions, Judge.
All right, any recross? No. May this witness be excused?
Judge, no, we ask that he remain under subpoena until potential rebuttal evidence.
You're not off the hook, but you're free to. Next witness. Judge, people call Detective Marjorie Martin.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ma'am. Detective, would you state your full name and spell your last name for us?
Marjorie Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N.
Thank you. Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Detective, what do you do for a living?
I'm a deputy with Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you held that position?
19 years.
And do you have all the training, certification, and education necessary to be a peace officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
And were those all in place on April 20th of last year?
Yes, they were.
Were you working that day?
No, I was called in to work.
Okay, why were you called into work?
I am an evidence tech with the Sheriff's Department, and I'm in charge of the evidence and property room.
And where were you called into specifically?
The Swan Boat Club.
And that's located in Berlin Township, Newport, Michigan, County, Monroe?
Yes, it is.
You responded to the Swan Boat Club?
Yes, I did.
And once you got there, did you receive an assignment?
Yes, my job as an evidence tech is to take pictures of the crime scene for, if it goes to court, and collect any evidence that's needed.
Okay. Did you take photos while you were there?
Yes, I did.
Take photos of the scene?
Yes.
And you also took some of the MEI photos, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
For the jury, what does MEI stand for?
Medical Examiner Investigator.
And what is that?
The detectives are trained, and some of our deputies are trained to examine the bodies for kind of like a pre-medical exam before the autopsy. We do that at the crime scene.
And those photos go to the medical examiner eventually?
Yes.
And so you took both photos of the scene and photos of the kids who had passed away?
Yes, I did.
And you've had an opportunity since to review those photos?
Yes.
And they're a fair and accurate depiction of what you saw at the scene that day?
Yes.
So, Judge, people are going to move to admit People's 8. That's 8A to 8 quadruple N. That's 8 N, 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 N. Photos taken by Deputy Martin at the scene of the Swan Boat crash. People would note for the record that although she did take MEI photos, we are not submitting those to the jury.
Your Honor, I just have maybe 15 seconds to confirm and I may stipulate to it. We did talk prior, Mr. Lorraine. No objection, Your Honor.
People's 8A through 8 quadruple N are admitted. Thank you, Judge. And we don't intend to publish these at this time. They're just for the jury upon deliberation. Okay.
Detective, I'm sorry, you're also assigned to run the evidence room at the sheriff's office, is that right?
Yes.
And so you deal with blood samples from OWI investigations on a regular basis, is that right?
Yes, I do.
What does the sheriff typically do when a blood kit from an OWI investigation comes into the evidence room?
So the deputy that collects it puts it into our evidence lockers. They're secured evidence lockers, kind of picture.
I'm going to object to this. It would be irrelevant as to what sometimes they do. It would be, in this case, what was done.
It is to show the conformity of procedure with this case with typical procedure.
I think it is a procedural issue. The objection is overruled.
So our evidence lockers, we have a hallway that is open to the deputies. There's 56 lockers. Each one has a key, and it's secured. Each lock is keyed differently. So when the deputy collects the sample or any piece of evidence, they get into our computer software, describe the evidence item, toxicology kit, whatever it is, and then there's a section that's called temporary evidence locker. The computer tells you which lockers are open. They select a locker. They then walk to the hallway, confirm that locker is open by having a key. They drop it in the locker, lock it, and then they put the key in locker item 1. There's a little slit for the keys. And then the evidence and property room has those same lockers on the other side. The only people that have keys to the evidence room was at the time myself and Captain Raymond. I was responsible for the daily activities of that and emptying those lockers. So every day I'd come in, I would collect the keys, and I would also check my computer system, which would tell you where the items are. I would open the locker from the inside of the evidence room, confirm that was the item that was there, and then for the toxicology kits, they would typically, I check it in the computer, I move it from temporary storage to external out of service, or not out of service, apologize, out of custody, and I put it in the mail typically. And the U.S. mail delivers it to the lab.
Is that what, so are you familiar with the toxicology kit from this case?
Yes.
And up till what you've described, were all those procedures followed to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they were.
But did you place that toxicology kit in the mail?
So this one did not go into the mail.
What did you do with this kit?
Deputy Krieger came to me and said that he was going to personally drive it to the lab in Lansing.
Okay. Does the Monroe County Sheriff's Office refrigerate toxicology kits that come in?
No, we do not.
In your 19 years employed by the Sheriff's Office, have you ever known them to do so?
No.
Okay. No further questions for this witness, Jeff.
Cross. Do you know if the state refrigerates the toxicology of blood? Do you know if the state, once they obtain it, that they refrigerate it?
I do not know what they do with it.
That's fair. I didn't know if you had any experience at that level. No. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
May this witness be excused.
From the people, yes. Yes, Your Honor. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next witness.
Judge, people call Lieutenant Brian Tilly.
I solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, sir.
Lieutenant, would you state your name and then spell your last name for the record, please?
I'm Ryan Sottile, Sottile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Lieutenant, how are you employed?
I work for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been in that role?
20 years.
Any prior law enforcement experience?
No.
And do you hold all of the trainings, education, certifications necessary to be a peace officer in the state of Michigan?
Yes, I do.
And were those up to date on April 20th of 2024?
Yes, they were.
Were you working on April 20th of 2024?
No, I was not.
You were off duty on that day?
Yes.
Were you called in?
Yes, I was.
Why were you called in?
I got a call because I operate our drone. So I got a call from the sheriff advising me there was an incident. We needed the drone on the scene.
What does the drone do?
It's a small unmanned aerial vehicle. It flies in the air with the remote control. I have a controller and a screen on it. Has a camera, has infrared camera, and a zoom lens camera.
So you can take photos with it?
Yes, take photos.
Does it take video too?
It takes videos and photos, yeah.
And on April 20th, were you sent to the Swan Boat Club?
Yes, I was.
Is that to take photos with the drone?
Yes.
And do you know about what time you would have arrived?
I believe I arrived on scene at about just before 5 p.m., about 4:55, I think.
A couple hours after the crash?
Yes.
Okay. And the defendant was no longer on scene?
No.
And on that day, did you deploy the drone and take photos of the Swan Boat Club and surrounding areas?
Yes, I did.
How does, just briefly if you can, how does that work?
Take the drone out of the box, just some assembly required, putting the battery in it, putting the blades out, turning it on, turning my remote control on, the controller on, It runs a self-jack, it grabs GPS, make sure it knows where it's at before it'll fly, and then push the 2 levers and it takes off.
Do you decide what photos it takes? Does it just snap automatically every second?
There's on the controller, I can push, take videos, take photos. I also can set it up to automatically take photos while it's flying.
What did you do on that day?
I ended up doing both. I did had it fly a pattern to take a bunch of pictures just as a mosaic if we needed it, and then I manually took different pictures at different positions over the scene.
How do you get the photos off of the drone?
The camera is mounted on the drone, and there's a micro SD card on the camera. So once the drone comes back to the ground, I pull the micro SD card out, and then I insert it into a computer. I take the pictures off the card.
Did you have an opportunity to review those pictures?
Yes, I did.
And are they fair and accurate representation of what you saw that day?
Yes, they are.
All right. Judge, the people are going to move to admit 9A through 9DDD, that is 9DD. 2 or 3 of these were previously admitted, but they are just the aerial drone photos.
Okay. People's 9A through 9DD are the...
DDD, Judge. Triple D.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant, Judge, I'm also going to move to proffer 9K to the jury. Detective, this is a photo you took. I said detective, sorry. Lieutenant, this is a photo you took?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And if I can get the thing to work here. This is the pavilion. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Where is defendant's home located in reference to this?
I'm not 100% sure. I know it was down the street.
Okay. And I'm going to proffer 9HH, Judge. Lieutenant, can you tell me what this is?
It's looks like a picture of the pavilion or where the party at, and there's a hole in the side of the building.
The hole is where the defendant's vehicle entered?
Presumably, yes. Yeah.
And what are these right here?
Looks like pieces from the building or pieces of clothing.
Are these telephone or electric
I'm sorry,
poles?
I'll take the white stuff. Yeah, the telephone poles, yes.
Okay. To
Sorry.
your knowledge, did the defendant's car pass between those 2 poles?
I believe so, yes.
And
Objection, where's the foundation of how he believes that happened?
so I asked him if he had knowledge of it. I asked him what knowledge was
Either he
there.
has knowledge or he doesn't. The objection is over.
And I'll also proffer 9LL. And this is just a close-up of those same telephone poles. You took this photo?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I have no further questions. This witness.
No question. When you say are you moving to admit HH and LL?
Judge, I believe they were already admitted all through that stack we just gave you. I'm just publishing to the jury, Judge.
All right.
Thank you.
Cross? No. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Next witness.
Judge, may this witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, we call Detective Jeff Cooper.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Just make sure the jury. Got it.
Detective, would you state your full name and spell your last name, please?
Jeff Hooper, Hooper. I apologize to the court for my voice. It's residual from a issue a couple weeks ago.
All right, no problem. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Detective, how are you employed?
I am currently the sergeant for the Detective Bureau at the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
And what does that mean? What does it mean when you say I'm a sergeant?
So I supervise the detectives in the investigations that come through the Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
I've been in law enforcement now for 24 years.
Is all of that with Monroe County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
And you hold all the training, education, certification necessary to be a certified peace officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
And that was all up to date on April 20th of 2024?
It was.
Were you working on April 20th of 2024?
I was not.
Were you called in?
I was.
Okay. And on that date, were you the sergeant?
I was.
Okay. And how long have you been a detective?
I've been doing investigations now for approximately 10 years. About 9 of that is a detective and then 1 year as a supervisor.
Were you involved in the investigation at Swan Boat Club on April 20th?
I was.
And was that in the supervisor role?
Yes.
How did you become aware of the crash?
I received a phone call from Lieutenant Zebek requesting assistance with the investigation.
Do you know approximately what time you would have arrived?
I arrived approximately about an hour and a half after the initial crash, I believe.
About 4:30 then approximately?
Yeah, 4:30, 4:45.
Was the defendant still on scene when you got there?
No.
What did you observe when you arrived at the Swan Boat Club?
Just chaos. There's a lot of investigators there. Starting to do the investigation, different aspects of the investigation, whether taking pictures or doing various things.
And did you at some point enter the Swan Boat Club?
I did.
And how did you enter it?
So I entered through a little breezeway that was kind of to the left of where the car had entered the building.
At some point, did you enter the main building?
Yes.
And why did you enter the main building?
We had learned that there was video surveillance, and I was meeting with somebody to get that video surveillance.
Somebody from the boat club gave you access to their surveillance?
Yes.
Were you involved in executing a search warrant of defendant's home?
Yes.
And do you recall when that was executed?
Monday, so I believe that would have been the 22nd, I believe.
April 22nd of 2024?
Yes.
2 days after the crash?
Yes.
And what were you looking for in that search warrant?
Specifically, a DVR with video footage of, around the defendant's house.
Surveillance video from the defendant's home?
Yes.
And did you locate any cameras during the execution of that warrant?
We did.
And how many did you locate?
4.
Do you recall where they were?
Yes.
Where were they?
There was one on a barn that was across the street from the main residence. There was one on a garage on the same side of the road as the residence, kind of facing down, facing the car. Then there was a camera that was facing the door of the main entrance of the residence. And then there was also one in the kitchen in the residence.
Did you discover what those cameras were connected to?
Yes.
Can you describe what that was?
So it's a digital video recorder, or DVR, which stores the video footage.
Where did you locate that DVR?
It was located in an upstairs, I'd say like a utility room with various other things in it.
Inside the defendant's home?
Yes.
Was it functional on that day?
Yes.
Did it appear to be recorded?
Yes.
Were you able to determine if it was connected to the cameras that you found?
Yes.
All right. How did you go about that?
So basically, I looked at the video footage that was currently being recorded, and it was my detectives doing searches, their cars in the driveway, and so it was live that way.
What was the manner of recording?
So the manner of recording it was via Wi-Fi. It wasn't hardwired to the DVR, so it was just recording me over Wi-Fi.
Do the cameras record 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
No, we later learned that the cameras were motion activated.
Did the video recording have timestamp on it?
It did.
Were you able to check it for accuracy?
Yes.
How did you do that?
So when you're on scene, when you're looking at a DVR playing live, what you basically do, what I do is I pull out my phone, look at the time on my phone, look at the timestamp on the video, and compare the difference.
Did you find it to be accurate?
No.
What was different about it?
So that one specifically was an hour slow. So if it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on that DVR, it would show 2 o'clock, 2 p.m.
The DVR would show 2 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. The timestamp would show 2 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have experience with video recording devices similar to the one you found in defendant's home?
Yes.
Can you briefly or tell me your experience with that?
So in doing investigations for 10 years, there's always a large surveillance aspect to investigations. And so by doing those for 10 years, I would go out to various businesses and utilize, with their permission, the export functions on DVRs. And if you use, most DVRs are similar in nature to how you get the video off of it. So.
Did you seize that DVR?
We did.
And were you able to examine it to determine if it was recording on April 20th of 2024?
Yes.
It wasn't?
Yes, it was.
Did you find video pertinent to around the time of the crash?
Yes, we did.
And were you able to extract any copies of those videos?
Yes.
And you were able to access video?
Yes.
Okay. Did you review that surveillance video?
Yes.
And is this a copy of the recordings?
Yes.
Not all of the recordings?
Correct.
Just the what's pertinent around the time of the accident?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know what camera this video is from, or cameras, if it's more than one?
Depending on the video, I believe it's the one from across the street on the barn, if it's showing the car leaving the residence.
Judge, we're going to move to admit Exhibit 11. If defense prefers, I can publish it first.
Your Honor, may we approach? Sure. Thank you. Where would you like us to approach? Over here.
Mr. Mayor, you said Exhibit 11.
Yes, Judge.
You may go ahead, please.
Okay, thank
I
you.
was just going to say, Your Honor, we had a sidebar, if I may, on the record reflect that I consent to no object.
Judge, for clarity, I will again move for the People's Proposed Exhibit 11 to be admitted.
Response. No.
People's 11 is admitted.
Deputy, what's the time stamp on that video? Detective, sorry.
Currently on the screen, it shows 2:01 p.m., I believe 2:01.
And in your reviewing of it, what time do you actually believe that to be?
3:01.
Which, does that correspond with the time that she would have crashed into Swan Boat Club?
Yes.
And in your role as detective in this case, do you know what time that crash occurred in at Swan Boat Club?
Yes, it's right around, I believe it's 3 o'clock in like 50-some seconds, somewhere right around there.
And in your investigation, did you discover any other crashes that the defendant was involved in on April 20th?
Yes.
What did you discover?
So through this video, we learned that the defendant had crashed, excuse me, into her neighbor's truck with enough force to push it back over a fence.
Do you know approximately how far she pushed that truck?
I didn't measure it. I would guesstimate 20 feet.
Is that the truck? You can barely see the corner of in the video?
Yes, and then also off screen there was a little pine tree that just to the right, if it would have been in front of the truck on the side of the road, that she also crashed into.
I know it's off screen, but are you saying it would have been over here off screen?
Yes.
Or on this side of the street over here?
Across the street.
Right here? On
Yes.
this side of the street where this driveway is?
Yes.
Okay. So she crashed into a pine tree?
Yes.
And then she crashed into the neighbor's truck?
Yes.
And then she crashed into Swan Boat Club?
Yes.
In your investigation, were you able to determine approximately how far defendant's home is from Swan Boat Club?
Just by using Google Maps, approximately 550 yards, or I'm sorry, 550 feet.
550 feet.
550 feet.
Judge, we would ask to show on the screen 9K, please. Detective, is defendant's home on this screen?
Yes.
It is where I'm highlighting?
Yes.
And what is this across the street?
The barn where the camera is located.
And so the neighbor drive would have been on this side, on the other side of it, right? Just off the screen?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to move to publish Exhibit 9, double ZZZ. And Detective, do you know what this photo is?
Yes.
And can you see defendant's home in this photo?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury where the defendant's home is located?
So it would have been, it's towards the bottom of the photograph. That house right there.
This
Yes.
is her home?
Yes.
And this is the garage across the street you referred to?
Correct.
Is this the neighbor's vehicle that she crashed into?
Yes, it is.
And that's the fence you described?
Yes.
Did you, were you involved in an interview with the defendant?
I was.
When did that occur?
That occurred on the day after the crash, the
So
sort of
that would
21st.
Sunday, April 21st?
Yes.
Where did you conduct that interview?
At the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, Detective
And
Bureau.
who was present during that interview?
It was myself and Detective Modelinsky.
And was it recorded?
It was.
Have you reviewed that recording?
Yes.
Is it accurate representation of the interview?
Yes.
Has it been edited to your knowledge?
No.
No. Were portions that are inadmissible taken out for the jury's view?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, we will move to admit Exhibit 10, but we do not intend to proffer it to the jury at this time. Judge, it is hours long, and we provided a defendant months ago.
Judge, I don't know. I understand that you provided it, but I don't know if that's the same one that I've seen. I don't mind tonight looking at it, and then in the morning, Your Honor, I can consent or object if it's not the same. I can't just do something blindly, sort of. And I don't mind putting hours in tonight after the court.
Defense has a copy on his desk, Judge. I'll reserve this witness. We can bring it back up tomorrow.
All right, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge. If your representation is, well, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Judge, no further questions this time. Obviously, we're going to hold this witness.
Understood. Cross.
Is it Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sergeant. And you're a detective, correct?
Yes.
And you were a detective back on April 20th of last year?
Yes.
Okay. Were you the one primarily in charge of the case?
No. It was a team effort on behalf of a lot of Sheriff's Office personnel. I just kind of coordinated that.
All right, thank you. Now, you executed a search warrant at my client's home at about, would you say about 3:12 in the afternoon on April 22nd, 24?
I'm not sure of the exact time. I thought it was possibly before lunch. If my memory serves me right.
Records, at least the ones I've looked at, say about 3 o'clock, a little after 3. Could that be wrong?
I haven't seen those records. My recollection is it was a little bit earlier than that.
Okay. And are you aware of me filing my appearance with the prosecutor's office?
Objection, Your Honor. How is this relevant?
I'm asking him.
How is it relevant?
I mean, can I ask the question? And then
Well, the
we find
question
out?
is whether it's relevant or not. When you filed your appearance.
Well, because I was never contacted, and I want to confirm for the record of when I filed my appearance, if he can say yes or no.
The objection is sustained. Next question.
If you don't mind, I ask the prosecutor if you could cue up the second picture that was when you were talking about the I appreciate it. May I walk over there to point? Sure. All right, well, you speak up. I will. Just so you go back to the one prior to this, please.
Talking about this one?
Prior to that, or
Are you asking for the video or the picture?
no, there was a still picture. There was a still picture, and you had said in the upper right-hand corner, or was that the actual video that looked like a still picture?
Okay, hold on just a moment. You're referring to this?
Yes, thank you very much. Officer, can you see?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I'm not so tall, but there's a tree about right here. Would you agree?
Yes, there's a pine tree over there.
And this video that you obtained from my client's home security camera, does the original one show that tree? In other words, this goes back, let's say on this screen, 4 inches, 5 inches.
So
the original one.
the video that I extracted was given to the prosecutor's office, and that's what yes.
Yes, what? That there was a tree?
Yeah, there was a tree. Not in the video that I saw, no.
Is this a duplicate of the original that you took from my client's home?
It's the original, yeah.
This is the original?
Yes.
You didn't get a copy for the prosecutor, and that's what's being shown?
I extracted the video, put it on some media, and then put it into the evidence locker.
You say extracted. What do you mean by that?
So when you extract the media, you go through the DVR, say what videos you would like to export, and then you put them on some sort of media, whether that be a flash drive, a thumb drive, a pocket drive, and then that is then placed into the digital evidence locker at the sheriff's office.
Did you have somebody that was trained in IT, or did you handle this yourself?
I did it myself.
All right, I don't have any other questions.
Redirect. Detective, does this video appear the same as how you originally saw it?
Yes.
Did you make any changes or alterations to the video?
I did not.
No further questions, Judge.
Any follow-up?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You may sit.
Thank you.
Next witness. Judge, we're going to call Deputy Burkhart. I think he's short enough to finish before lunch. Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Sir.
Deputy, if you would state your name and then spell your last name for us, please.
Deputy Nicholas Burkhart, Burkhart.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Deputy, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently employed by the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you held that position?
I was hired in April of 2006.
Okay. Do you have all the training, certifications, and education necessary to be a peace officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
Those are up to date today?
Yes, sir.
And they were up to date on April 20th of last year?
They were.
What's your assignment within the Sheriff's Department, Deputy?
I'm currently assigned to our department's civil division. At the time of this incident, I was assigned to our department's traffic services division.
Could you explain to the folks on the jury what traffic services does?
The traffic services division is a unit of the sheriff's office that responds to traffic crashes that involve critical injuries or fatalities.
So for lack of a better term, you folks do accident reconstruction and crash investigations?
That is correct.
Were you working on April 20th of last year?
I was.
And were you dispatched to a scene that brought you here to testify today?
I was. At the time of this incident, when it occurred, I was handling a separate injury traffic crash in Monroe Township, and I responded to this incident after that one was completed.
Okay. What did you do where did you respond?
So I responded to the Swan Boat Club, and then upon my arrival, I began taking preliminary photographs of the scene, and I also was assisting other deputies on the scene.
Was your primary assignment in the role to which you were assigned, traffic services investigation?
Yes, it was.
And to that end, you took photos of the scene?
I did.
Did you also oversee the extrication of the vehicle from the building?
Yes, I was present when the vehicle was removed from the building, and then I followed the vehicle after it was taken from the building to an inside storage location at Jim's Towing.
Okay. You answered my next question. It was towed by Jim's Towing?
Correct.
And stored there at their tow yard?
Yes, it was stored in an inside locked facility.
So you took your photos of the scene before the vehicle was removed?
Correct. I took initial scene photographs prior to the vehicle being removed, yes.
Okay. And then did you take any photos back at Jim's Towing?
I did. On the 22nd of April, I returned and took additional photographs.
Okay. Deputy, this is what's been marked people's 13A to PP. You've seen these photographs before?
Yes, sir, I have.
And these are a fair and accurate representation of what you saw of the scene and of the vehicle back at the tow yard?
Yes, sir.
Don't touch it there. People's 13A through people's 13 PP are good.
Thank you, Jim. And Deputy, I'd just like to view a couple of those photos with you. Could we bring up 13L? Deputy, what does this depict?
This depicts an overall frontal view of the vehicle that was involved in this incident while it was in the inside storage facility at Jim's Towing.
Okay. We can see M, please. And what does this depict?
This is a closer-up version of the damage to the front of the vehicle.
And if we could see N. What does this depict?
Again, this is another picture of the front end damage, just kind of focusing on the right side of the vehicle.
So you initially went to Jim's Towing on the 20th. You returned on the 22nd to continue your investigation, is that correct?
That's correct. I followed the vehicle to assure that it was placed in a secured inside storage facility, and then I returned on the 22nd to continue the investigation.
Okay. Other than taking photos, did you do anything else as it related to the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I stood by while an employee of Jim's Towing removed the vehicle's event data recorder so I could take it back to the sheriff's office as part of the investigation.
What is an event data recorder?
An event data recorder is a module in most motor vehicles that will monitor various diagnostic points of a vehicle. It kind of constantly overwrites itself until an event occurs that causes the data points to be locked in.
Have you received any training with regard to event data recorders?
I did. In August of 2021, I successfully completed the Bosch CDR technician training that was provided by the Institute of Police Technology and Management at the University of North Florida.
So Bosch CDR training, what is that for the jury's understanding?
So the Bosch CDR is a computer program that allows us to image the data that's been locked in a vehicle's event data recorder and use that image to produce a report that can be analyzed.
Okay. So you took custody of the physical device, the physical unit from the tow truck driver?
That's correct.
And once you took custody of it, what did you do?
Once I had possession of the EDR module, I returned to the sheriff's office and utilized the Bosch CDR software to obtain an image of the data that was stored on the EDR module itself.
Have you done this sort of thing before?
I have.
About how many times?
I would estimate a few dozen times.
Okay. And this extracts information from the unit to create a report, you said?
Yes, it takes an image of all of the saved information on the module and generates a report for it.
Okay. Deputy, I'm going to show you what's been marked People's 14. It's a stipulated exhibit, but just show it to you to identify it. Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, I can. So this is a copy of the Bosch CDR report that was generated as a result of the image that I took of the data that was on the EDR module.
Okay, and that's the EDR module. Well, let's back up. I never asked you this. What kind of vehicle is this?
It's a Ford Edge.
Okay. Do you know what model year?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay. So at this point, Judge, people would move for admission of People's 14 as a stipulated exhibit.
People's 14 is admitted.
Thank you, Judge. So, despite how many of these you've downloaded, are you qualified to discuss the contents of the report?
I am not.
Why not?
There's a separate course, which is an EDR analysis course, and I have not attended that yet.
Okay. So you're qualified to procure the image, but not to analyze it and discuss it?
Yes, so my qualification...
Hey there, thanks for stopping in. We hope you will join us again. We all look forward to next time. We got to talk about true crime.